Okay, imagine this scenario because it's really counterintuitive. You feel deeply attached, maybe even, in love with someone who causes you consistent harm. You know you should leave intellectually, but actually doing it. It feels almost physically impossible. This isn't about weakness or some kind of moral failing. It's called trauma bonding, a really powerful neurochemical trap. So today we're doing a deep dive into this, what it actually is, how it sort of hijacks the brain, and importantly, the evidence-based path to breaking free.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that trauma bonding, or traumatic bonding as it's sometimes called, is actually a well-defined thing in psychology. Researchers Dutton and Painter first described it back in the 80s. Basically, it's the development of these really strong emotional attachments between someone being abused and their abuser.
Right. Okay, so let's unpack the mechanics. How does that even happen? The research seems to point to two main things, right? First, there's got to be a serious power imbalance, and second, this pattern called intermittent reinforcement.
Exactly, intermittent reinforcement.
Which means cycles of abuse or neglect followed by, what, sudden kindness, apologies?
Precisely. Intense kindness, apologies, affection. It breaks the tension. Now, people often confuse this with Stockholm Syndrome.
Ah, good point. They sound similar, but they're not quite the same.
Not exactly. While both involve attaching to an aggressor, Stockholm Syndrome is usually linked to, a specific time-limited event like being a hostage. Trauma bonding, on the other hand, almost always happens in ongoing relationships. Intimate ones, romantic, family, even sometimes mentorships, where there's this sustained emotional connection, or at least the appearance of one.
Okay, connecting this to the bigger picture, the neuroscience behind it sounds frankly alarming. You said it mimics addiction.
It really does. When the abuse happens, the brain gets flooded with stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, fight or flight stuff. But then, when the abuser switches and shows affection, or maybe vulnerability, the brain gets hit with reward hormones, dopamine, oxytocin.
So it's this up and down, this chemical roller coaster.
Exactly. And the key player here is dopamine. It actually responds much more strongly to unpredictable rewards. Think of like a slot machine versus a steady paycheck.
Okay, yeah.
That unpredictability, the intermittent reinforcement, it actually forges stronger neural pathways than stable, consistent rewards do.
Wait, so are you saying the brain gets a bigger hit from the chaos and relief cycle than it would from just stability?
Neurobiologically, yes. It's quite startling. Your brain essentially gets hooked, not necessarily on the person themselves, but on the possibility of that reward, that intense feeling of love or approval after the stress. And we can see this. Brain imaging studies show people in these dynamics have neural activity really similar to substance addiction, especially in areas like the nucleus accumbens and the prefrontal cortex.
Wow.
Which explains why leaving feels like withdrawal, because, well, chemically speaking, it is.
So what makes someone more vulnerable to falling into this kind of trap? Research mentions it often develops slowly, right? The social trap idea.
Yeah, it's insidious. The abuse tends to escalate gradually, so you kind of normalize each step. It's hard to see the whole picture until you're really deep in it, already dependent on that cycle.
And are there specific risk factors?
The biggest one, consistently identified in studies, is childhood attachment trauma. Things like inconsistent or abusive caregiving. It leads to insecure attachment styles later in life. And research suggests this accounts for, well, over half, like 53% of the variance in who develops these patterns, especially fearful or anxious, preoccupied types.
Okay, now here's something from the research that I found really surprising. It said that the more empathetic the victim is, the stronger the trauma bond can be. That seems backwards.
It does seem counterintuitive, doesn't it? But yeah, the data supports it.
56% variance. This sounds huge. Is it saying that for some people, their own empathy is actually a bigger risk factor than the abuser's specific tactics?
In a way, yes. Empathetic individuals, they tend to try and understand, to rationalize the abuser's behavior. Maybe they think, oh, they're stressed, or it's my fault somehow. They focus really intently on those moments of kindness, the apologies, rather than the overall pattern of harm. And yeah, that empathy-driven rationalization accounts for a significant chunk of the psychological damage, up to 56% in some studies.
Okay, so understanding all this, what does it mean for actually recovering? You mentioned evidence-based approaches.
Right. It's not just about knowing the terms like CBT or DBT, but those are key tools. It's about the actual work. Things like challenging those distorted, harmful beliefs about yourself and the relationship. Learning how to actually regulate those incredibly intense emotions. and using specific techniques like EMDR or attachment-focused therapies to process the trauma and those deep attachment wounds.
And you mentioned psychoeducation earlier.
Yes, and this is absolutely critical, helping people understand the neurobiology we've been talking about, that their brain was responding predictably to, essentially, manipulation. It's incredibly validating. It reduces the self-blame massively. They start to see they weren't weak, they were caught in a neurochemical process.
So recovery usually happens in phases.
Generally, yes. The first phase is stabilization. This is all about safety, establishing firm boundaries. And often this requires complete no contact. You have to cut off the source to stop that addiction cycle in the brain. Then comes processing, where you actually work through the trauma itself. And finally, reintegration, rebuilding your sense of self, learning to form new, healthy, safe attachment.
And group therapy fits in there too.
Oh, definitely. It's hugely important throughout. It provides validation, breaks the isolation that these relationships thrive on. It shows you you're not alone.
So the core message seems to be, well, hopeful, actually, that these bonds can be broken.
Absolutely. With the right support, recovery is entirely possible. But it's key to remember, it's not just about leaving the person. It's about rewiring those neural pathways, healing those underlying attachment wounds. It's deep work.
Okay, here's a final thought for everyone listening. If intermittent reinforcement, that unpredictable reward, is that powerful in the brain, powerful enough to create addiction-like bonds, where else might you be experiencing that dynamic? Maybe not even in romance. Could it be at work? With certain friendships that feel, unstable but occasionally rewarding, how might understanding that reward system change how you evaluate those connections too? Something to think about.